All right. We are officially live streaming. Let me go ahead and click the got it buttons here and the OK button here. And we lost Robert Fleming. All right, but I'm sure he'll be back. He may just have X'd himself out accidentally. All right, welcome everyone to American Graveyard Calls to End Gun Violence podcast live here in November 2024. I cannot believe it's already November. How nuts, how crazy to think the year is flying by. And we are still every day talking about gun violence in America. You know, last night there was another mass shooting in Orlando and in Colorado as well. So we'll open today with the news clip from my favorite television news anchor ever, Lester Holt on NBC. I really, really love that man. And I got to see outside the studio in Rockefeller Center when I was in New York City. So that was very exciting as well. All right. To open the show today, I want to welcome everyone for being here. I'm your host, Marissa Prada. I'm joined with Rick Spisak, Blitz the Poet, and Robert Fleming. I'm sure we will be back any moment. Our mission statement is at American Graveyard Podcast Live. We're an international collection of artists who come together in a unified global call for an end to gun violence. Each month, we will cover is composed of facts, opinions, personal stories, local and global news, events, historical information, and other such matters. We will list where information was obtained and do our best to ensure that citations are from reputable and true sources. This is a free speech, not a hate speech zone. The disclaimer for this podcast is this podcast will discuss topics that may be graphic in nature and or unacceptable for some audiences, especially children. The discussions may include firsthand accounts, videos, audios, photographs, articles centered around gun violence. The opinions and viewpoints expressed during the show are not necessarily the opinions and viewpoints of every host, guest host, special guest, Red or Green Books, or The Word is Right. Viewer listener discretion is advised. All right. Today, we are going to be talking about the mechanics of mass shootings. The mechanics of mass shootings is our topic. If you have not yet purchased your copy of American Graveyard Calls to End Gun Violence, please do so. We have a call right now for the volume 2. You can send up to 3 unpublished original works, literary works, and or black and white artwork to American Graveyard Project. No. American Graveyard Program at gmail.com. I will double check that before the end of the show because I always forget which P I used in that email. I'm pretty sure it's American Graveyard
Purpose
Program.
No.
Purpose. Okay, good. That's why Bliss is here. Keep me straight. American Graveyard Purpose at gmail.com. I should have picked a better word because I stump myself every time on that.
You're good.
And it's such a new email. I haven't. That's why I'm here. American Graveyard Purpose at gmail.com. You can send it there. You can visit the website redorgreenbooks.com, red READ. Please grab the book. You can purchase both of the books together, the literary book and the art books, full color art book, both of them for $40, which is a phenomenal price. Those proceeds allow us to do a volume 2, which is the call that we have out now. If you are interested in doing Sponsor a Senator, we will send a U.S. state senator of your choice anonymously a copy of American Graveyard. Go to the website, redorgreenbooks.com, and you can pick the state. There are some states that are completely sold out, so you'll have to pick a different state if your state is already sold out. A big shout out to Alexis Garcia, Vex Lex, for her namesake for this book, American Graveyard. She submitted a poem titled American Graveyard, and I was so moved by it that I asked her if we can name the whole entire anthology this. And now, of course, there's the podcast. So big shout out to Vex Lex for the namesake of the book. Last week, we covered the second show and the Second Amendment. So we were talking a lot about the Bill of Rights and what it is to have the right to own a gun, to bear arms, to protect yourself, your property, that type of stuff. Today, we're switching it and we're going to be covering the mechanics of mass shootings. As always, we will cite the sources and our resources for the show at the end. If you would also like more information about this, you can go to our Facebook page or Instagram page and our website for more information on the future events. Next show, the December show, it's already going to be December next month. We're going to be how to survive the holidays, mental health, and suicide. And so there's no stopping the train of information that is forthcoming. All right. So the first thing we're going to do today, because I realize there may be some people who have not watched the news, not seen the news, don't want to. Well, I'm going to show it to you tonight or today about what happened yesterday in America. Yes, Rick.
No, nothing. Go ahead.
Okay.
I
I want to make sure your hand was up because you had something to inflect real quick. Okay. So last night I was watching the nightly news by Lester Holt, and I just love Lester Holt. I will watch him every night, and when he's not there, I'm so sad. But everyone, the team at NBC News is wonderful, and this is not a political statement. So when we show clips, news clips or YouTube clips, please understand that we are not choosing based on an affiliation to any network or organization that may support any political person. Okay, this is not political at all in nature. It's just the news that I personally prefer, and I prefer Lester Holt to read me what's going on in the world. So he brought to the forefront in his news last night the mass shootings that happened in Orlando, Florida, and in Colorado. And so let me go ahead and play that for you. I'm going to make myself the host on this computer so that I can do that. Yay, now I'm the host. I have the power. All right, let me do a screen share and share that tab. And we'll watch it, and then we'll come back and we'll do a quick discussion, and then we'll actually go into defining what a mass shooting is, and we'll hear from Blitz the poet before he needs to leave today. So here we go.
It was a violent Halloween night in multiple cities across the country with deadly results, including a mass shooting in Florida. Now, one major city is in a state of emergency. Here's Jesse Kirsch.
From coast to coast, tonight multiple communities are dealing with a very real Halloween scare, deadly shootings. In Florida, the mayor issuing a local state emergency and a fire overnight on a downtown packed with tens of thousands of people. This police-edited video shows the suspect walking through the crowd, appearing to turn back toward a blurred individual before raising a gun and firing.
Get on the ground! Get on the ground right now!
Police tackling the alleged shooter within minutes. In total, 8 people were shot, 2 killed, according to investigators. Among the survivors, 20-year-old Anthony Berry, who says a bullet grazed his head.
What do you think happens if you didn't crouch?
We wouldn't have this interview. It's not even an if, it's a definite fact.
Meanwhile, Colorado police say a Denver area house party shooting left 3 people dead. And in Washington state, authorities say someone in a Halloween-type mask shot and killed one person at the Vancouver Mall. No one is in custody from either attack.
But here in Orlando, police say they do have the 17-year-old suspect in custody. He now faces multiple charges, including 2 counts of first-degree murder with a firearm. Lester?
Jesse Kirsch in Orlando, thank you. More than 40 million people across the Northeast are under red flag warnings tonight, including in...
Okay, so that was the clip that they played about the shootings. We know sometimes the holidays spark craziness in people in Halloween. We're on the heels of Halloween now. But it's important to continue to discuss this. It seems like there's always a mass shooting right before this podcast. And I don't think it's us necessarily looking for something to happen. It just is happening. And we want to bring some of the most current events to this podcast, also as a historical reference for the future, right? This is going to be an ear tag, a bookmark, if you will, within history as we continue to roll out this podcast. But what are everyone's, first instincts or first reactions or responses to the shootings that happened this weekend?
I feel as if in this instance, it was unfortunately not in a controlled atmosphere. And the problem with it being a Halloween theme, being around Halloween, where there's people in a public setting in costumes walking around, you can't decipher you can't decipher if it's a prop or whatnot, because unfortunately with it being Halloween, you can masquerade like that. And so I feel as if in order to control something like that, you may have to cipher that there are no costumes, no props being around certain crowded areas to try to prevent it. But at the same time, if somebody knows how to disclose a handgun, it's still going to be very difficult. And that's my opinion.
One of the other issues,
Anyone
I
else?
think, I was going to say, one of the other issues that comes up is, as terrible as the mass shootings are, it's more common statistically that you're killed by someone you know, that you're killed in your home. And the statistics are really very clear on that. The mass killings out in towns, in theaters, in churches, in schools, as horrific as they are, they're really outnumbered by the murders that happen from someone you know or someone you're aware of or a family member in the home.
I'll comment. I'm Robert. There was a critical piece of information which was missing from the reporter about the weapon. Was it a weapon of whether it could only shoot one bullet at a time, or was it an automatic weapon which could shoot multiple bullets in quick succession? So that happened last night. I don't know whether there's been any release by the police about that. While I was watching the video, I thought about what are the types of similar places that I go to where something like that could happen to me. I live 4 miles from the Atlantic Ocean, where there is a boardwalk, which is 1 mile long, which frequently has hundreds of people on the boardwalk, and I saw myself there. Also, in October of every year, our gay community center has an outdoor street fair, which is about 4 blocks long, where there are hundreds of people, and those are the 2 places which look similar to the street scene which I saw on the video. Thank you.
And I was thinking about the fact that the Pulse nightclub had been shot up, the gay nightclub in Orlando. And so now this is the second mass shooting, mass casual. Well, there was 2 deaths, right? So 1 death is too many, but 8 people being shot, right, is a huge thing. And it's now the second mass shooting resulting in death event in Orlando. I'm sure that, ongoing investigations, law enforcement is pretty tight-lipped about certain things up front. They usually will not release specific information at the very beginning of an investigation, but they did mention it was a teenage boy who was the shooter. So, they did not release his ethnicity or his religious.
I'm on a Zoom podcast, before I head to church. You know, it's the
Blitz,
first Saturday.
where's your mic? I got him. I'm sure he's answering his phone and pressing buttons. We love Blitz, but this is a rolling joke with Blitz. Mute your mic. All right. But anyway, so I'm sure that they'll report on more details as they are told to them, as they are unfolded. But it will be interesting to find out the motive, the type of weapon that was used, if anyone succumbs to their injuries and the death toll rises, those types of things. I would love to bring first responders and medical professionals, perhaps ER intake doctors or trauma surgeons to the podcast to talk about the devastation that they see from a medical standpoint as a result of bullets in the human body. The types of injuries sustained and those things from different types of bullets and different types of weapons. But yeah, I'm sure all that information will come out, Robert, as the details are released. All right, so today is the mechanics of mass shootings. So I'm gonna do this. Blitz, let me. I'm gonna show this clip. It's a news clip that is talking about the mechanics of mass shootings. Like, what is the definition of a mass shooting? It's a wonderful place to start. It's about a minute, and then we'll come back and we'll take, reactions and thoughts to that, and then we'll have Blitz do a poem, and then Rick can go into his. He has some statistics and some things to do, and then we'll go back into another reading, and then if Robert wants to do a reading, and we'll kind of do this today until we're done with the podcast. All right. So just sit tight, Blitz, but you'll be up soon to read. So just be ready. Let me do this share screen tab. Like walking you guys through what I'm doing. Here it is. Okay. And I don't remember off the top of my head. I don't have my notes on this, but it'll say on the screen, and I will reiterate it verbally for the podcast, where this video is taken from. So this is WKYT, and this is their video on what is the definition of a mass shooter. So let me press play.
Day, we've had a few viewers with the very same question.
Yeah, several of you have asked what qualifies as a mass shooting. Well, here's Victor Puente with the answer to that good question.
One of the issues with reporting on a shooting like the one we had early this morning in Lexington is there is no official definition of a mass shooting. Different resources have different criteria. For example, in a report on public or deaths, not including the shooter, the FBI calls an active shooter one or more people actively engaged in killing or attempting to kill people in a public area. We use the definition established by the Gun Violence Archive. CBS News, Reuters, and the Wall Street Journal all cite that resource. The archive says a mass shooting has a minimum of 4 victims shot, either injured or killed, not including the shooter. They do say that there are multiple types of mass shootings, including public shootings, bar or club incidents, what they call family annihilations, drive-bys, and workplace incidents. So by that definition, a mass shooting doesn't have to be premeditated, but it does have to impact multiple people with an act of violence. If you have a good question, just email us. goodquestion@wkyt.com. I'll see you on WKYT Mornings.
My wife.
Okay, so the Gun Violence Archives, we're all very familiar with that website on the podcast, and so you're always welcome to go and check it out. Gunviolencearchive.org is their website, and the news organization deemed it at least credible enough to report on. So what are your takeaways? At least 4 people shot in a public place, does not have to be premeditated. What are your all's thoughts on the definition of mass shooting based off of the Gun Violence Archive?
It's unfortunate in so many ways. With the easy access to guns, the stress of economics and social issues, that so many people have come to view a gun as a solution to their psychological pressures. And I think we really need to make intelligent violence reduction a part of our educational system, because people who've seen too many movies, have no historical context, have no real human value context when they turn to a tool like that to solve, unfortunately, so many different problems.
Robert, did you have any comments on that?
Yes, I wanted to share, since the definition includes a public place, I just went on to Google and found out where are the public places on Earth which have the most people. The first one is Times Square, New York City, where it says that there's an estimated 50 million visitors each year. The next one is Blue Lagoon, Iceland, which is a geothermal spa. And the third one is the Great Smoky National Park in Tennessee. So those would be the places in public where there would be the most people. Thank you.
And I know for sure, like New York City has Times Square on lockdown. You know, there's a huge police presence. I mean, even post 9/11 is more so. For Iceland, I don't know, but it's very interesting to find out, you know, where I would have thought it would have been like Singapore and India, or Mexico City, right? I was thinking those were the places you were going to say, you know, was going to list. So it's very interesting to look at from that perspective. All right, let's invite Blitz to read a poem, and then we'll go into some stats from Rick Spisak, and then I also have stats on mass shootings as well. Blitz, are you ready? Would you like to share a poem with us? You might have to unmute your mic because I muted you, or I can unmute you if you want. Let's see. I'll type in the chat. I don't know if he has his phone on. He may not be looking at the chat.
Would you like me to do some stats until he resurfaces?
Yes, that would be great. Thank you so much, Rick.
Okie doke. I'm going to share screen. And let me bring up my little slideshow here. Of course, we're here at the American Graveyard podcast discussing the troubles with gun violence. Okay, this is the number of shootings in the United States between 82 and 2024. And this is from the Gun Violence Archive. So you see here that there's been a sporadic but general increase in the number of gun violence incidents. Here we have 3,000 victims have lost their lives, 606 mass killings since 2006. And, you know, this is the issue of, should we say, non-state mass murder. Mass murder from the states, from the different countries is a whole other tragedy. Here we have tracking of mass killings and victims compared year on year. And there's obviously, we're not quite at the end of 2024, so who knows where that's going to end up at the end. Here we have public shootings versus non-public shootings. And what you'll see is that while there has been this steady increase in public fatal shootings, it pales, sadly. It pales to non-public or in-home and in-office type murders. Very, very unfortunate information. And here we have residents, the location of these mass killings. As you can see, although commercial and open space and vehicular and schools and all that is high, too high, obviously, but you see in the home, it's just not even comparable. Too many of these homes, too many homes have been the scene of these terrible things. Okay, here we have the relationship of family and acquaintance way, way, way outstrips strangers and first responders, which again is too high anyway. But my gosh, you know, with the availability of guns, the availability of weapons and bullets, we can only unfortunately anticipate even more of this. Here, gun deaths surpass car accidents as the leading cause of death for children and teenagers. That's horrific. It's absolutely horrific. Anyone who's considered this, now, I don't care what kind of gun enthusiast you are. You want to have a gun around for fun, for recreation, for hunting. I don't understand how there's an answer to this incredible loss of children. How that can be acceptable, I have no idea. Here we go again. That same statistic I thought was worth looking at again. And here we have the types of weapons used in mass killings. Clearly, guns versus knives, fire, sharp objects, explosives, blunt objects, strangulation, vehicular, guns. They may have had a cute little quip that guns don't kill people, people do. Well, without a gun, I guess there might be a few less of these, don't you think? Here we have the party breakdown. 45% of Republicans and GOP-leaning independents personally own a gun, compared to 20% of Democrats and Democratic leaners. Men, 40% say they own a gun versus 25% of women. Community types, 47% of people living in rural areas versus those who live in suburbs, 30% in urban areas, 20% race and ethnicity, 38% of whites, compared with smaller shares, 24% for Black and 20% Hawaiian. And let me move this and see, 10% Asian. Nearly 3/4 of U.S. gun owners cite protection as the main reason they own a gun. I can speak from experience. My father, for 20 years, never left home without a gun, and yet this gun ultimately was more than protection for him. It was his weapon of suicide choice. Do you want me to continue, or do you want to go on, Marissa? What's your pleasure?
Let's see if I know Blitz does not have a lot of time. He's got to go, but let's see if he can do his poem real quick, and then we'll pick this back up. So let me unmute him and see if he wants to do his poem now real quick before he has to leave.
All right, I'm here. Can you hear me? All right, I'll make this brief because I've got to drive.
Yeah,
it's called 19. Shots and screams, people bleed, but who is there to save them? 19 lives ended with no one to save them. Our boys in blue weren't able to save them. They wonder why people say defund the police. One man with a gun, and they're scared to stop him. Hearing children dialing 911 and no response. But let it be an unarmed Black man or someone possibly fleeing the scene and they don't stand a chance. 19 kids didn't make it home. There were at least 19 officers who did make it home after stalling for roughly 90 minutes to do what they are allegedly paid to do. They're supposed to protect and serve, but the nerve of these to tase and cuff a parent who was willing to do what they wouldn't and save lives. A police chief whose next move was politics didn't seem to care, as he possibly stared at the situation and was like, not my problem. I'll be on the city council soon. So Uvalde elected a coward, fraud, who probably ran a good campaign game in order to get a position of power. He got what he wanted, the people's vote. Now we know what kind of man you truly are. Pete Ariando may have schemed his way into a council seat, but will he repeat? The people of Uvalde have seen your true colors. So how will you fool them next? What's the old saying? You can fool some of the people all the times, but you can't fool all the people all the times. I might have that wrong. We know where you truly stand at this point. Those kids' blood is on your hands, along with the 2 teachers. One bad decision left 21 dead, and a whole community shook. The city shook for years to come. Uvalde, Sandy Hook, Columbine. Unfortunately, the list goes on. When will the madness end? That's all I've got.
When will the madness end? Yes, Blitz. And Arredondo did, I believe he got arrested and is serving jail time or will be arraigned on charges with other officers from Uvalde. And we will do a dive in future episodes on gun violence in schools. So we will look at Columbine, Newtown, Uvalde, Sandy Hook, some of the other places where there have been mass shootings in schools, and take apart those, because what happened in Uvalde really sparked this movement, the American Graveyard Movement. And it's really important personally to me, especially being in New Mexico, being in communities that are close to the border, to continue to shine a spotlight on what happened in Uvalde.
And I was going to say, when I wrote it at that time, he had just got elected, but he hadn't resigned yet. And I may need to update that, but I know that he was arraigned and arrested for his lack of action. I won't say action, lack of action. Yeah. So I do know that. But
and I rip him apart in my poems. I have nothing nice to say about the man. So we'll just leave that at that. Yeah, but you can find Blitz. Where can people find you, follow you, all that good stuff?
You can find me on Instagram under Blitz, BLITZ _ THA _ poet. And it will also link you to my Facebook account, which I believe is under my real full name, David Jackson. Because if you look for just my name, there's 500 people that'll pop up.
But I'm so glad you came in, Red. Blitz is out of Dallas, so if there's any
Fort Worth. I'm sorry.
That's right. I'm sorry. That's right. Fort Worth. And there's a lot of amazing programs and things happening in Texas for spoken word artists, and I really appreciate Blitz for coming on board. And you know what? You should come back and share your story about what happened to your friend. I think that that's a really important. I mean, you can, if you want to, if you don't want to, I know I'm putting you on the spot and I don't want to give details, right? Because we haven't talked about it, but it's something to consider because of what happened. So,
I mean, it was somebody I knew, but I wouldn't. But long story short, I knew an incident that happened. And after hearing about it, it just made me think and write. And so I don't want to go into details about it, but maybe at a later date.
And it ties into what Robert was talking about with, could this happen to me? Can this happen where I am or in places where I frequent, right? Because it almost happened to you, Blitz. And so having that, you and Robert can share stories about this in future podcasts, perhaps it would be.
And I was going to say, as far as mass shootings, because I kind of missed part of the breakdown because I was getting myself together, but about like the 3 most popular areas where it's like 3 most popular cities, and we're surprised like Times Square it hasn't happened, but it can happen almost anywhere because we've had mass shootings at churches, movie theaters, grocery stores, Walmarts. It's just random where these people decide where they want to make an impact, because I know in 2019, I believe it's 2019, when the gentleman drove from the Dallas-Fort Worth metropolitan area, Plano to be exact, to drive all the way to El Paso just to do a mass shooting at that Walmart. That was something that was orchestrated, like the young man who drove about 2 or 3 hours to Buffalo just to target minorities. And not every mass shooting is a race-based one. Some of them are just completely random. And so it's just, you never know where a mass shooting can take place. Like,
well,
we had
remember last week, the guy who was on the balcony of the high rise or the hotel, and he had that automatic weapon on the balcony just shooting people in Atlanta. I think it was Atlanta.
I mean, yeah, that's kind of like what happened in Vegas a few years ago when I don't know which hotel it was, but when they got to his hotel room, they noticed he had tons of ammunition. I mean, it's unfortunate so many mass shootings happen to the point where we can't exactly keep track of all of them anymore, because they happen so often that I don't know what to say, but it's like, I don't want to say it's the word that's at the tip of my tongue. I can't think of it right now, but not diluted. I think not diluted. It starts with a D. Desolate. No. It'll come to me later, but it's just. But
you're right. We don't want to get inundated with so much information that we become numb to hearing this and talking about this, right? We don't want to become complacent, and this is our normal life in America now. We need to continue to talk about this. I mean, the graphics that Rick put up on the screen were incredibly provocative to see. Compoundedly more deaths by guns versus anything else, mass shooting deaths by guns from any other type of weapon. And we're talking hundreds, if not thousands of times more, right? So understanding that mass casualty events might still happen without guns, but a lot of them aren't. It will prevent a great deal of
I know in some countries they have gun laws and gun restrictions. It doesn't mean it's going to eliminate. If somebody's going to be violent, they're unfortunately going to be violent. But of all weapons that you can use, a gun is the unfortunately easiest one where to get the mass amount of casualties. Because if somebody were to walk around with a knife and randomly start stabbing people, you would, after the third or fourth victim screams, you're gonna know, hey, there's a citizen with a knife out here stabbing people, and you can apprehend them. But if somebody's from a rooftop, a balcony, and starts firing shots, it's gonna take a minute before you can get there and stop them. And so
and we are gonna talk about the types of guns and the types of ammunition and the types of augmentation to weapons that allow for things like more bullets to be discharged at one time. So bump stocks, for example, being able to shell out a great deal of bullets in a much shorter period of time, because that is definitely more devastating than a revolver or a Glock, right?
I'm not sure if Rick went over the stat about how there's been more mass shootings in the year than days in the year. I know that's been something that's been an occurring theme the last few years. There's been more mass shootings.
To look up to see if there's like certain days. I'm going to make a note of that, days of the year for gun violence. I know that the holidays, right? So we're talking next time we're going to be talking about the holidays and mental health. And I know the holidays are a big thing for folks. And I do want to just reiterate that this is not an anti-gun podcast. This is an anti-gun violence podcast. We're not saying that everyone needs to turn in all their weapons and give up their guns, right? We've never said that on this podcast. We're advocating for responsible gun ownership, for stricter gun laws and gun violence awareness, prevention, protection. Those are the things that we advocate for in the show. So it's not like we're saying we need to abolish necessarily the Second Amendment, or everyone needs to turn in their guns, or we need to go into a militant, government state and go door to door and take everyone's guns. We've never said that. We're not a proponent for that. We're just saying that we need to end gun violence, which means being very restrictive on who, what, when, where, why, and how guns are obtained, utilized, maintained, and owned in this country. So, Blake, I know you have to go, but I do appreciate that. That's a very interesting thing to look at, days of the year for gun violence, and enjoy doing whatever it is that you're going to be doing today.
All right, I will catch y'all on the flip side. Y'all all be amazing people. I will talk to y'all later. I'll stay in the Zoom until I'll stay in the room until I have to walk into the building.
Okay, cool. Very cool. Thanks. All right, you can find him at Blitz_the_poet, Blitz the Poet on Instagram. He's amazing and a good friend of mine. Robert F., I see your hand is up, so I will turn the floor over to you. And Rick, if you would like to add anything as well, I'm just going to mute myself and listen.
So I was very struck by the statistics that you presented, Rich, about the majority of the incidents happen by people who know each other. And I'm trying to connect the statistics that you said with the TV newscast about what is a mass shooting. And what my speculation is that the structure which would know each other would be a family. And I'm wondering, first, the newscast said that a mass shooting has to occur in a public place. Is a residence where a family would live considered a public place? And is that where the shootings are happening? My second question is, since the newscast said you have to have 4 victims of the shooting, is typically what is happening is one of the adults shooting all of the other members in the family? I understand that they may not have clarified any of that, but if they did, I'd appreciate you just letting us know. Thanks, Rich.
Sure, I'll show you the statistics that I received from the Institute for Gun Violence. Here, let me share the screen. And what they say here is that now they differentiate public fatal shootings from non-public fatal shootings. And you'll see here that there are far more non-public shootings. In other words, homes and apartments and that sort of thing. It says that typically a guy who kills his wife and children, sometimes kills himself, is the most common type of mass killing. Mass killings take place far more often in private homes than in schools, supermarkets, or churches. But I think what you want to appreciate is, and I say this as a person who's worked in commercial media, you've heard that horrible phrase, if it bleeds, it leads. And human beings are the kind of creature that wants to hear the most salacious, that wants to hear the most splashy, the colorful graphics, the horrendous, there's a lot more horror movies than there are movies about people having a conversation over some tea. So people take it for what it is. People like to see that. And as a person who's worked in commercial television, I can speak to editors who said to me time and time again, if I have to search the country for one more bloody car accident to put on the news, it's going to make me be ill. And unfortunately, that is the nature of the human media. And were it better, that would be a marvelous thing. In fact, the reason I produce the media that I do on the web is because I promised myself, having put on the air so much disgusting human behavior, I wanted to make sure that what I participated in the future was positive, constructive stories about good people doing good things. So yeah, there's a if it bleeds, it leads is unfortunately an axiom of commercial television. And I know editors have quit because they just didn't want to do that anymore.
So most of the shootings occur in a residence, which is considered a private, not a public space.
Correct.
So
correct.
The news said that in order to have a mass shooting, it has to be a public space. Is there another term for an incident where it happens in a private space, like you were talking about a family's residence?
Murder? Murder?
It's just called a murder.
You
It's
know,
not a mass
I mean,
shooting. Okay.
and
Just to
remember
react
though
to
that
that-
there really is not a definition for mass shooting, right? I mean, there isn't a government or federal definition, if you will, for mass shooting. In the news clip that we watched in the beginning, not the Lester Holt one, but the one from the local station, they did bullet point and outline that even the homicide of families, you know, an entire families being killed, would kind of extend within the scope, if you will, of a mass shooting. It's the culture and of society's viewpoint of mass shootings. The first thing that people, I think about is a large public place that was very crowded, or a school. People are now really thinking about the detrimental loss of life within a residence. But if 40% of Americans own guns, or 38% of Americans own guns, that's, you know, one in almost 1 in 2. So, you know, 4 out of 10 people, 2 out of 5 people own guns in their home, and most people are not trained or take any sort of, you know, training. Like, you know, you have to pass driver's test and you have to renew your licenses. Well, there's no sort of management training for people. Maybe they get a gun and they don't use it for 10 years, but then, you know, something happens. And we all know that if you are a gun owner, you're more likely to have your gun taken and used on you if you were in some sort of hand-to-hand combat situation, or in a forced entry into your home, those types of things. So it's no surprise to me, with 40% of Americans owning guns, that the majority of loss of life happens in a residence. And the car is also considered, at least in New Mexico, an extension of your home. So it could also be a shooting within a car if it's considered an extension of the home. So that would be interesting to see if any of that affects the statistics. But I would say, you know, instead of getting necessarily caught up in, you know, is it a mass shooting? I think everything where 4 people or more die from the actions of one person, it is considered from the gun, you know, from a gun, and the actions of one person would be considered a mass shooting. Before people are shot, they don't even have to die. Right, they just got to be shot. And it used to be 3, right? The gun violence, they had to raise the number to 4, and they'll probably have to raise it to 5 to consider it a mass shooting. But there is no federal definition right now for outlining what is and isn't. I would think a private mass shooting or a public mass shooting is still a mass shooting, at least for me, perhaps for the sake of this podcast. But more broadly, anyone who is shot 4 or more people, not including the shooter, would be considered a mass shooting event. I don't know. What are you guys? I mean, do you guys think it should be more specifically outlined?
Well, I think every murder is one too many. And in fact, I'd like to read a poem about a particular murder that speaks not necessarily to mass murder, but to something that's far, far too common. It's called Tap, Tap, Tap. And it's about Ahmad. I'm sure you remember this situation. Here, tap, tap, tap for Ahmad. My feet, the roadway slaps. With spring, the joyous running brings the knees, the ankle freeze. Tap, tap, tap. The road away does lap. Tap, tap, tap. I have my course, and down the road I force. Each step adept I take. Past trees and trucks I make. Tap, tap, tap. Down roadway shining. Slap away the noises trap. The cars, the jars, the snaps. Tap, tap, tap. The legs and ankles rankle, snap. The ways momentum traps. Tap, tap, tap. The breeze, the trees, the calling birds, the winged flap. Tap, tap, tap. Leaves, jobs, and slobs and grasp, fleeing, freeing. Hope supposed. Tap, tap, tap. The miles, the minutes disclose. Tap, tap, tap. The stiller tiller jars when wounding static mars. Tap, tap, tap. Past lawns and sprinklers spawn the construction and all well worn. Tap, tap, tap. Here, wind and water wills the lawns and fawns and thrills the children at their play at the closing of the day. Tap, tap, tap. My feet absorb the shock where others only talk and stare and gawk. Tap, tap, tap. My evening's passions plot. Tonight I'll visit Mabel, and there around the table squeak and squawk. Blam, blam, blam. Goddamn. Tap, tap, tap for Ahmad.
I think the cadence and the rhythm of that poem is incredibly powerful. It was devastating what happened to him. We continue to see that, and we will be talking about things like what happened to Ahmaud Arbery. We'll be having those in subsequent podcasts as well. As long as everyone wants to continue fighting this good fight, I'm here for it. Robert, do you have any input on that poem or any response for Rick?
No, I don't. I'm not familiar with Ahmaud, but thank you for asking.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and show a poem by Mr. Witz, and then we can discuss it. It is his poem from American Graveyard, Calls to End Gun Violence, and it's a poem that he read during one of the book releases that we did for this. We did many, I always say many, like 2 or 3 different book launch events for this book, that some of them stretch the span of 6 hours. So they're very long. All of the people who came out to read from this anthology, between the 2 books, there are 76 contributors in 8 different countries represented. So it is a global call for an end to gun violence. And I did speak with Mr. Witz through messaging with him this morning, and I invited him to come and talk about it, but he has work and other things going on today. But he is excited that we're going to be showing his poem. Of course, this is such incredible advocacy work, and this man is a master wordsmith. He's a crafter of the spoken word. I got to meet him in person in Charlotte this spring, which was lovely. And his handle is Mr. Witz the Poet. Let me just double check to make sure I have that. You can catch this video on our YouTube channel. You can also catch it on our Facebook page. Yes, Mr. Witz, WITZ, the Poet is his Instagram handle. And he's also on Facebook as well. So let me do a share screen and pull that up, and we'll listen to him read. Hang on one sec.
Thank you. This piece is entitled, "The Ghetto Can Be So Quiet." The ghetto can be so quiet some nights, drowned out in sirens, setting fire to the brick of the buildings with their light, suffocating the rights they violate inside of those there to witness. Screaming voices seem to find their barriers in the holding back of mourning mothers. The white sheet laid over the deceased body feels just like a Klansman's claim. Lines have been crossed, drawn this way before. The officer still streaming smoke out of the pistol, barely raised an eyebrow, remorseless in standing as the cavalry walled off the crowd's disapproval. But the news willed silence, along with the radio, to a no legend beyond a neighborhood leak. Asphalt claiming the bodily fluid. Not every name makes the face of the papers. The press, we know, is our cheeks boned to the ground. Most of the justifiable homicides filed, every bite of the bullet, identified by our teeth and fingerprints. Yet the trigger will get the blame. The guilty charges found in the arraignment, this time the arrangement of weapons, the slip in an instant that can make a hand mistake a loaded gun for a fully charged taser. They said weight never actually played a factor. Fact is, your shield never tilted a blindfolded scale. Show us the way. You handle your authority, priority over reason to kill. I guess when it comes to Black lives, you black out. Your targets always have been a Black image to cast out, a shadow of what it means to be a civilian. The tracks of your shoes are a bathroom of duty. The integrity of being a force, the police, a department overseen to the capture and keep of the average human being, writ in your Miranda, your authorization of rights upon approach, while standing over and looking down a barrel, tunneling your guilty vision. Can't be my back exposed in view of my running away that threatens your safety. Bulls in your eyes, reminding you of hunting, calling for your pellets to charge down range. Escape is not an option, nor is surviving. We are responsible for our actions, but apparently you are not. What is the procedure for taking a life when you have a back running away from you? The training will be yours to own. The sorrow will be ours. Black and gunned down, killed on a birthday. And what's left to celebrate is now a dedication of tomorrow's promise boxed inside a memorial, dressed in flowers, pretty enough to present as a gift to God. And still no answer, no justice, just a moment of silence. The ghetto can be so quiet some nights.
Right? He's amazing. You know, and his brother Jaw Smalls, Coach Jaw Smalls, wrote the foreword for American Graveyard. They have very interesting, unique perspectives and experiences, and they're very generous human beings who talk a lot about this issue and are very blunt, but also artistically moving. The way that he reads poetry and the way that he writes really intense things, but in a way that you can't help but be completely engulfed in his work. What are some feelings that you all have, or things that you, reactions, things you're thinking or feeling?
It's such a shame that life for so many people is deemed so cheap. And it's unfortunately still the case that certain communities face more police violence than others. And it's also the case that prejudice is still too strong across America. We need to make progress on these areas. And unfortunately, the humanities in general are fading in our education system. The arts, I was in my high school when I moved from Pennsylvania to Florida. Florida's schools were still segregated in 1967. And I noticed, and I called to the attention of the music teacher. I said, you know, you're playing the music of African American composers, but you don't allow African American or Hispanic children in this orchestra. That's completely wrong. And his response was, well, that's the way I've always been doing it, and that's the way it's going to be done. And the joke was on him because the following year, Dade County schools, Greater Miami schools, were desegregated finally, and they sent this bigoted gentleman, I use the term very loosely, to an all-black high school. And as one might guess, he did not stay long. We need to make progress, and unfortunately, the Black communities, the Hispanic communities of this nation still suffer.
It's very interesting to me, the parallels between segregation and the right to own guns. You know, when you say, well, this is the way it's always been done, this is quite often the exact same response from pro-gun enthusiasts. This is the way it's always been done. We've always had the right to carry guns. This is our right. We get to do it. We've always had guns. We'll always have guns. You're never going to take my guns. We have the right to do it. It's our right. It's always been this way. It's very interesting to me, the parallels there in that response. Robert, did you have anything to add? Would you like to do a poem, sir?
Yes, I'll add something, and then I'll share a visual image. When I was in grade 11, I took my first class on economics, and the teacher, Mr. DeRoche, shared a section of our textbook which said the reason that entitlements and Social Security was created so that humans, when they were struggling, would always have a minimum of their needs met, and this would result in less violence, because when people don't have their minimum needs met, we turn into acting like other animals. But even though in the United States that we have Social Security and some entitlements, it's still not working. We are still turning to violence for competition. So I'll share my piece. I need you to let me share the screen when you
You should have the power. Oh, wait, that's right. You went out and came back in. Hang on one sec, because I had made you co-host, but then I forgot. I did not remake you co-host, sir. So let me go ahead and do that, and you should be good to go now.
So this is one of my candidate submissions for the next American Graveyard. I was inspired by the readings that if parents intend to have guns that, and they have children, that the safest place to store the guns is out of the house. But it never said where out of the house the guns were going to be stored. So I imagined that they could be stored in a gun safe and in a shed in the backyard. And that's what I'm representing here in this piece called "Children Are Safest When Firearms Are Stored Outside the House." The challenge for creating this piece as an artist was depth perception. I had to place the 2 gun safes at the back of the shed, which was a little bit of a challenge. But this is one of my candidate submissions for American Graveyard. Thank you for letting me share that.
I love your work, Robert. It really is very evocative, and it's very thoughtful and edgy, and I just love it. So if you are interested in getting the full color American Graveyard book, Robert does have a piece in that as well. It's wonderful. So thank you for continuing to do it and doing it unapologetically and very courageously as well. Sometimes images, right? They say images are worth 1,000 words. Is sometimes the images themselves speak very loudly. So when people are not necessarily into poetry, they will maybe look at an image and be completely moved in a way that they wouldn't have read through. So thank you for that. All right, so let's see. I have, okay. Now I totally forgot about this. I was going to read this after Rick's. Statistics. So let me just go over some of these statistics here. And the only other thing I have today is the something positive, right? We like to do something positive every podcast because it is such a horrendously difficult topic, and it can get very heavy and very sad, and it's very desponding for me oftentimes. So I like to do something positive. So I do have something positive for the end of the podcast. But I want to read to you real quick. This is from Cornell University. We promise on this podcast to really do some research and pick reputable places for our information to be discussed. We try not to skew any of the information. We try not to pick sides. We really just are coming to you with the best facts that we can find, being unprofessional podcasters. All right. So this is from Cornell University. I didn't even realize that there was a degree for this. This is the Cornell Cooperative Extension. The website is eden.cce.cornell.edu. And you can do a /security/ I don't know, is it / or /? I don't know, /. So eden.cce.cornell.edu /security/mass-shootings. So if you go to Cornell University, they have a program called the All Hazards Preparedness and Response Education Program. Like, this is happening so much that Cornell University created a whole program for people to take. And they outline in here what is a mass shooting. They talk about how to be prepared, what to do with an active shooter and the aftermath. And I will see if I can. It kind of cut it off for me on the printer here, but I will read as much as I can. Here we go. Okay. Mass shootings include mass murder and spree killings. They are conducted by one or more active shooters. The FBI defines mass shootings as 4 or more murders occurring during the same incident, with no distinctive time period between the murders. These events typically move in a single location where the killer murdered a number of victims in an ongoing incident. There may or may not be an additional persons injured in such events. With exceptions, many acts of mass murder end with the death of a perpetrator or perpetrators, whether by direct suicide or being killed by law enforcement personnel. Through a mass shooting, through a mass murder. Oh, excuse me. I apologize. I'm kind of blind reading this today. Though a mass murder differs from a spree killing in that a mass murder may be committed by individuals or organizations, whereas a spree killing is committed by 1 or 2 individuals. We group them together here. According to an article in Psychology Today, FBI crime data indicates that since 1980, single victim killings have dropped by more than 40%. but mass shootings are on the rise. A New York Times article researched the frequency of mass shootings and found that during the 20th century, there were about 1 to 2 mass murders per decade until 1980. Then they spiked with 9 during the 80s and 11 in the 90s. Since the year 2000, there have been at least 27, including the massacre in Aurora, Colorado, and in Newtown, Connecticut. I mean, clearly this is not updated to November 2nd, 2024, but this is what is on the Cornell website. So they say be prepared. An active shooter is an individual actively engaged in killing or attempting to kill people in a confined and populated area. In most cases, active shooters use firearms, and there is no pattern or method to their selection of victims. Active shooter situations are unpredictable and evolve quickly. Typically, the immediate deployment of law enforcement is required to stop the shooting and mitigate harm to victims. Because active shooter situations are often over within 10 to 15 minutes before law enforcement arrives on the scene, individuals must be prepared both mentally and physically to deal with an active shooter situation. So they give you some resources attached to the U.S. Department of Homeland Security active shooter preparedness website. So I definitely encourage you all to go check that out if you want. They say the best way to prepare your staff for an active shooter situation is to create an emergency action plan and conduct training exercises. The training, they will help prepare your staff to effectively respond and help minimize loss of life. There's more information. They give you a link. You can go to the U.S. Department of Labor, Occupational Health and Safety Administration. They say some good practices for coping with an active shooter situation. Oh, yes, Robert.
I'm just saying goodbye for today, and thank you for having this podcast.
All right, thanks, Robert, so much for hanging out with us today. Thank you so much. All right, so some practices for coping with an active shooter situation. Be aware of your environment and any possible dangers. Take note of the 2 nearest exits. If you are in an office, stay there and secure the door. If you're in a hallway, get into a room and secure the door. And as a last resort, attempt to take the active shooter down. When the shooter is at close range and you cannot get out, your chances of survival is much greater if you try to incapacitate them. Call 911 when it is safe to do so. Those are the instructions on the Cornell website. They do offer an aftermath plan. They say a high-profile event of this magnitude can result in confusion and distress among communities across the state. Distress can result in distortion about the facts of the event. Therefore, special attention should be given when communicating with community members. A number of resources are compiled to assist those involved with aiding community members' efforts to cope with the aftermath of a mass shooting. They give you a link titled Helping Your Children Manage Distress in the Aftermath of a Shooting by the American Psychological Association. And they give you a resource for families and caregivers from the National Child Traumatic Stress Network. So again, please go to the Cornell website and click the links if you would like. For that, it's the Cornell Cooperative Extension with their program, the All Hazards Preparedness and Response Education Program. So go and check that out, please, and read all that information. If you have never thought it can happen to you, please don't think it can't. It's better to be prepared. If you stay prepared, you don't have to get prepared. And it's an unfortunate culture in the climate that we live in today, always having a plan should something happen in an area where you are located. Rick, any thoughts on the Cornell program?
It is sad beyond words that a program like that has to be developed. It speaks so profoundly to the dilemma we find ourselves in. And I can only hope that calmer, cooler heads will begin to lay the foundation for some improvement in our education system. That people begin to turn away from the gun as a solution to their dilemmas. You can't remove stress. You can't remove economic uncertainty. You can't fix capitalism overnight. So consequently, we know we're going to have to live with stress. That's a reality. And you know, the human condition is such. We are mammals. We have needs. The economic system doesn't really help those needs often. In fact, makes great obstacles. So there's going to be tension. There's going to be stress. There's going to be emotional outbursts. But maybe we can eventually turn from these fatal decisions. You know, I mentioned when we've had our first meeting that, you know, people say, well, we've always had guns. Well, no, you know, as a matter of fact, in the Wild Wild West, they refused to let guns come into town. That's also true. Now, you know, obviously, if you're on the frontier and you're trying to protect the land that's been stolen from indigenous peoples, there's going to be friction, there's going to be tension, and unfortunately, from time to time, you know, it's going to result in murder. But murder is murder. And people who profess some kind of religious values and yet can somehow turn away from this, I do not understand. If for those people that are religious, it doesn't say, yeah, well, you can murder if. It just says no. No is no.
It's kind of interesting, though, because you can murder someone and then go get your sins absolved. But that is a totally different topic, right? I mean, you're given outlines for how to live and what not to do. But oh my God, if you do them, we'll wipe the slate clean. Like, so that is a whole different topic.
One of the many concerns I have about that particular. Yeah.
We could do a whole nother podcast on that. But you know, truly nothing to be disrespectful towards organized religion or anything that you might believe in. You know, we're just really trying to find something to kind of lightheartedly laugh at, because these topics are very, very difficult for us to digest as artists and human beings and Americans.
May I offer one additional
poem? Much, Rick, for being here today. Let's finish with something positive. Yes, please.
This is a poem I wrote about the Ukrainian dilemma, and this is from an anecdote that I'd heard about, and it is really profound and I think telling, and it speaks to anti-violence and what that all might mean. So this is a story. There was a woman who was confronting a Russian soldier, and this is the exchange they had. "Why are you here?" the old lady asked. "My dear young soldier, standing there with your rifle so bold here on my street, on your way to your defeat? Are you here to kill your brothers? Will they be glad that you killed their mothers? Kill their babies too? Do you have rabies? Is that why? Are you crazy? Must we die so you can save us, or will you find your grave here with us? Why are you here? Did you come to kill us? You'll die here, little man. Go back to while you can. Don't you understand, little man? You mustn't spill us and kill us and shoot us and pollute us." "Grandmother," the soldier responded, "you should go before it gets worse." "In all this killing," she said, "make it worse? You came to save us by killing us, plant your bombs and spilling us?" "You should leave," the soldier said, "before it gets worse." "Gets worse?" she said. "I place on you my most awful curse. You'll die here. You'll lie here, hated and worse. Put these seeds in your pocket so flowers will bloom where your body will fall after all." "Please go, old mother," said the soldier, "before it gets worse." "Worse than you and your killing? Will you kill us all after all to save us? In the grave your victory awaits. Get out of my gate. Go home before it gets worse. On you my most awful, lawful curse. And such I say to those who turn to the gun for their solution, for a gun to solve their problems. A bullet is no solution. Thank you, my friend. Thank you for bringing this wonderful program to bear. Thank you for sharing this important information. Thank you for just raising the topic. Thank you, Marissa.
No, thank you, Rick, because I can't do it without you. Yeah, I can't do it without a community of people who care as well. I was just one person who wanted to do something, and as a community of poets and artists and performers, we have created this amazing program. So I thank you, and I honor all of you and all of those who've died by gun violence. We fight for those who are still alive, for those survivors and those who have yet to be affected by gun violence. So yes, we're going to continue to fight this skid fight as long as we can. So let me go ahead and do a share screen. This is the fun, the something positive today. This is a YouTube clip of a 13-year-old Grand Prairie student, and she won an award for a poem about school shootings. And I thought this very poignant. She's also, Grand Prairie is in Texas, which we know is a huge gun state. So I thought this was very interesting and very poignant. So we'll end on this because what's happening is affecting children, right? Whether they're affected directly or they're watching it on the news. And so again, I think it's really important to consider the feelings of children, the trauma of children. When we are talking about arming teachers and we're having more armed officers in schools, how that affects our children, especially those who have been affected by gun violence. So I'm very proud of this young woman, of this girl, for winning this award. And I do hope it motivates other young people to continue to perhaps tap into poetry as a healing tool, an educational tool, an outreach tool, but also a tool for revolution. All right, so let me go ahead, mute myself. We'll do a share screen and start this tab. Hang on one second.
Two mass shootings in Texas in 30 days, 22 people killed in El Paso and 7 lives lost in Midland, Odessa. If you have a child in school, you know they face a much different atmosphere than we did growing up. School shooting drills are a constant reminder of the danger.
First week of school, my daughter says, I don't want my shoes to light up during the drill because we're supposed to be quiet and hide. Third grade.
Sad.
Third grade. One student in Grand Prairie is sick of all the violence, and she's making some change through poetry because she knows words matter. Here's Tiffany Liu.
You wouldn't understand.
These are words kids are told every day.
I swore I understood that my school was a target.
To Molly Chakari, kids do understand the fear of sitting in a classroom.
A target of a cultural epidemic.
The fear their school could be next.
A target of violence that you wouldn't understand.
The fear of a school shooter.
Why wouldn't I understand that at 13 my death was nothing more than a statistic?
She wrote this poem after 17 people were killed in Parkland, Florida.
To politicians and lawmakers, a political agenda that you wouldn't understand.
Molly is tired of left versus right. What she wants is for kids to stop dying.
Why can't you understand that my activism is not just a hobby? As bullets ricochet over my dead body, my last words might be shots fired, but all you fired is thoughts and prayers that you wouldn't understand.
The 8th grader pieced together words in a country divided over mental health and gun control.
The truth is, it's not about who's right or wrong. It's about the fact that this is going on and that's wrong.
No matter what view you take, mass shootings are real. And the meaning of Molly's words are beyond her age.
I know you understand that with age comes knowledge, but with you should also come innocence. And I only use the word innocent because it was shouted over my student body, they're innocent. That you wouldn't understand.
As adults, we need to listen.
What can I understand? What don't I understand?
In Grand Prairie, I'm Tiffany Liu.
Molly won 2nd place in a nationwide Young Writers Contest for that poem. It's now published in a book called Poetry Escape. Congratulations, Molly. You are an inspiration.
Bravo. Bravo. Well said.
And I will let let me go ahead and tell everyone who's listening exactly that news organization. That is WFAA. WFAA. That is an ABC affiliate out of Texas, Channel 8. And so what are your thoughts? Isn't that an incredible, I mean, it's something positive to come out of gun violence, but again, also I feel twisted about it because she's only 13. She's in 8th grade, talking about shooting in her school, right? Being afraid of that, not being heard, right? Nobody taking it seriously, nobody you know, having any sort of plan in place or recognizing her concerns. And so anyways, Rick, what are your thoughts?
One thing besides the beauty of what she had to say and her commitment to finding some kind of solution, I have to also salute the TV station for covering something that positive, covering the importance and raising up this young woman's concerns, because, you know, all the talk of improving schools by removing books, no book has ever hurt a child, but somehow we allow this. I can't imagine, but that shooter drills is far more traumatizing than anything that someone might discover in a book. And thank you for bringing this forward as part of this exchange. It was a very positive thing. And while I would take issue with the left versus right as a problem, I don't think there's anyone on the left who says there's just not enough guns and bullets around. That being said, I salute the young writer and her thoughtful discussion. And I salute you, my friend, a person who's considering an important topic, regardless of its commercial appeal. Bravo.
And
Marissa.
even though this video it's dated, right? Because they're talking about the shooting in El Paso. This is about 5 years ago when this video came out, and here we are pulling it 5 years later for this podcast. So a big salute to Molly. Maybe I'll try to track her down and see if I can find where she is now, to be able to bring her on the podcast. You know, she would be. She would be over 18 now. And it's very interesting to see perhaps if her point of view has changed, or if she, you know, how she feels like today. I would love to see where she's at in her life. And if she's considering publishing a book, I would be honored to launch a book for her as well. But it's, you know, we don't know who's going to be picking up this podcast in 5 years. We don't know who's going to be looking back at our discussions and saying, wow, they were talking about this 5 years ago. But I salute Molly. I do salute the news station for covering that positive story. I do thank everyone who came today. Thank you, Blitz. Thank you, Robert Fleming. Thank you, Rick Spisak, for being here. Next month, the first Saturday of December, we'll be done with Thanksgiving and we'll be almost to the holidays. Like, holy smokes. The year is blowing by so fast. Next year, we'll get to the end of this podcast without any more bloopers. Next month, we're going to be talking about how to survive the holidays, mental health and suicide, which both Rick and I have stories from. So it'll be an important topic. If you're interested in joining us for that podcast, please reach out to me at Red or Green Books. If you're interested in being a host, or just a guest, or come perform, you're also welcome to send me any videos or any poems or anything you would like me to read, and I'm happy to read them on the podcast. As long as I find that they are appropriate to do so, I'm happy to indulge people who would like to be a part of this movement. If you've not got your copy of American Graveyard Calls to End Gun Violence, please do so. And don't forget to submit to the Volume 2 at American Graveyard Program. What did we say? American Graveyard Program at gmail.com. I know. Listen, I got to put this in my typed agenda so that I stop messing around with it, because every time I go to say, oh yeah, don't forget this, don't forget that, and I don't want to leave the podcast without
The American Graveyard Podcast Live.
Right, but the email for the submission is right. So the email for the submission, let me pull it up real quick. I'm so sorry. I apologize to everyone for not having this typed in my typed notes here. Here we go. Okay. American Graveyard Purpose. American Graveyard Purpose at gmail.com. You can submit up to 3 unpublished original works, literary and or black and white artwork, 300 DPI. All right. Thank you so much, Rick, for being here today. Happy Saturday. I'm so glad that your beard and your hair has grown back just in time for Christmas. We need to wear the Santa hat. It's going to be great. If you've not gotten your copy of Rick Spisak, Stone Poetry is also available on the website, or you can go directly to him. All of his author information and book information is on the website as well. Thank you so much, Rick, for being here. Peace and blessings, everyone. We'll see you in December. Have a wonderful rest of your weekend.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.